X means the unknown. You see it in algebra, on treasure maps, in warning labels, in the name of everything from space companies to social media platforms. But here's the thing. X only means the unknown because medieval Spanish speakers could not pronounce an Arabic word. One phonetic accident centuries ago, and the entire world inherited the symbol. Here's how it happened. To understand why X landed where it did, you need to picture the medieval Mediterranean world around the 9th through 12th centuries. This was a period of extraordinary intellectual exchange. Arabic-speaking scholars in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba were preserving and expanding on Greek mathematics. They were doing algebra, developing sophisticated notation, and writing texts that would eventually transform European thinking. Meanwhile, in the Iberian Peninsula, Christian kingdoms in the north were slowly pushing southward in what historians call the Reconquista. As they reclaimed cities like Toledo in 1085, they inherited enormous libraries of Arabic scholarship, and suddenly, Latin-speaking European scholars had access to centuries of mathematical and philosophical work they had never seen before. The problem was that almost none of them could read Arabic. So the Great Translation movement began, and with it, a very specific linguistic problem that would echo for 1,000 years. Origin story. Here is where the story gets specific. Arabic mathematicians used a phrase that appears throughout their algebraic texts, al-shay, meaning simply the thing. When you are solving for an unknown quantity, you call it the thing. Al-shay was the placeholder, the variable, the thing you were trying to find. Now, enter the translators working in Toledo in the 12th century. Toledo had become the center of the translation movement, a city where Arabic, Hebrew, Latin, and early Romance languages all collided. Scholars like Gerard of Cremona, the Italian cleric who arrived in Toledo around 1144 specifically to translate Arabic scientific texts, were doing the painstaking work of moving this knowledge into Latin so European universities could use it. The challenge with al-shay was phonetic, the sh sound, that soft, hushing sound you hear in the English word shoe, does not exist in classical Latin. It also did not exist in the emerging Castilian Spanish that Toledo's translators were working within. They needed to render shay into something their phonetic system could actually handle. The solution they landed on was to borrow a letter from Greek. The Greek letter chi, written as the symbol that looks like our modern X, carried a hard, back-of-the-throat sound in Greek. It was not a perfect phonetic match for esh, but it was the closest available substitute in the Latin-influenced writing system they were using. Al-shay became shay in early Spanish transliteration, and when that moved into Latin, it was shortened and standardized to simply X. This was not a decision made in a single moment by a single person. It was a gradual convergence across multiple translators working across decades. But by the time key algebraic texts were fully Latinized and circulating through European universities in the 13th century, X had become the established symbol for the unknown quantity. The phonetic compromise had calcified into convention. Then came a figure who locked it in more firmly than anyone else. In 1637, the French mathematician and philosopher René Descartes published La Géométrie, a landmark work in the history of mathematics. Descartes, working in the Netherlands at the time, adopted X, Y, and Z as his preferred symbols for unknown variables, with X appearing most frequently. His reasoning is not entirely documented, but scholars have noted that X, Y, and Z were the least used letters in the French printing presses of his era, meaning there were more of the other letter tiles available, and typesetters found it economical to use the rarer ones for variables. Whatever the precise logic, Descartes' influence was enormous. La Géométrie spread across European academic culture, and with it, X as the symbol of the unknown became effectively standardized. The misconception. Here's the part where most popular accounts of this story go slightly off the rails. You will often hear the explanation stated as a clean, linear chain. Arabic al-shay was translated into medieval Spanish as shay. Medieval Spanish lacked the esh sound, so they substituted the Greek letter chi, and chi looks like X, so X it became. That story is not wrong exactly, but it flattens a messier reality. The misconception is that this was a deliberate, logical decision made by identifiable people following clear steps. The reality is that it was a translation gap, an imperfect phonetic substitution made under practical pressure that happened to stick. The Greek chi was not chosen because someone sat down and reasoned through the symbol system. It was chosen because translators needed something. Chi was available and visually distinct, and repetition across manuscripts and institutions turned that contingency into a rule. Most modern English words beginning in X are of Greek origin, which is itself a residue of this long history of Greek letters entering Latin and then English through technical and scientific vocabulary. The X in algebra is just one node in a much larger network of Greek-rooted English words, most of which arrived in the 19th century and later through scientific and technical coinages. Algebra got there earlier, through the medieval translation movement, but it is part of the same story. Modern echoes. That medieval phonetic accident is now embedded in global culture so deeply that we have stopped noticing it. X-rays were named in 1895 by Wilhelm Röntgen, who called them X-strahlen, meaning unknown rays, because he did not know what they were. The X was doing exactly what it had always done, marking the thing that had not yet been identified. In algebra classrooms from Jakarta to Johannesburg to Juneau, students are encountering the same symbol that Gerard of Cremona's colleagues wrestled into existence in 12th century Toledo. SpaceX, Xbox, X, as a rebranding of Twitter, X-Men. All of these are consciously or unconsciously reaching back to that same cultural reservoir. X signals the unknown, the experimental, the frontier, the thing that has not been named yet. That meaning has been stable for roughly 800 years. Deeper connections pull on the thread further, and the connections multiply. The word algebra itself comes from Arabic al-jabr, meaning the reunion of broken parts, from the title of a 9th century text by the mathematician Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Al-Khwarizmi worked in Baghdad, and his name is the direct source of the word algorithm. So the conceptual vocabulary of modern computing traces back to the same intellectual world that gave us X. The Greek chi itself has its own lineage. The Greek alphabet borrowed heavily from Phoenician script, which developed in the ancient Levant. The letter that became chi came through that Phoenician chain, meaning the symbol that sits at the origin of the unknown has roots stretching back past ancient Greece entirely, through Semitic writing systems that predate classical Mediterranean civilization. In English, the linguistic roots run a different parallel track. Old English to French to Latin to Proto-Germanic. These are the pathways that shaped the bulk of common English vocabulary. But X sits mostly outside that track. It arrived through the Greek to Latin to scholarly Latin pipeline, which is why words starting with X feel distinctly foreign in English. They are not native. They are imports from a different current of the language's history. That foreignness is part of why X retained its aura of the exotic, the technical, the not yet known. What you have in X is a letter that carries the memory of every translation decision, every phonetic compromise, every accident of printing and convention that shaped it. It is a medieval workaround that became a permanent